Like
And
it.
for people who are really struggling to see any light right now, just even asking like, who helped me today and who did I help today? And even if it was really small, like at the end of the day, um, you'll see that you are a part of a human community, despite the fact that many people don't want us to see that because it keeps us consuming social media. You are.
In your book, you also talk about what purpose isn't. So if I can touch on that for a moment.
Yeah.
I often say this to people, if you're struggling to understand what something is, think about its opposite. So tell us what you think
Hmm.
purpose isn't.
Purpose is not just a statement. So you can have a purpose statement, right, but not be purposeful. Purpose is the sense of your authentic usefulness, right? Purpose is not uh, something that purpose is not a activity. So while we've just mentioned an exercise you can do, it's not I've done this activity, I have purpose, right? Purpose is an everyday approach to living. It's also not if you lead a company and you're thinking about company purpose, it's not a brand. Your brand is not your purpose. Your brand should express what's already there, in terms of what people believe, right? But what purpose is when you look at like, there's this great articulation of this by sociologist Corey Keyes, and he talks about these different types of purposes. So the other thing that purpose is not is it's not equal. I mean, their purposes are not all created equal in terms of their impact. So you could have a reason for being that is very self-centered. But the type of purpose called authentic purpose that is most powerful in having all of these outcomes that we've talked about is a purpose that's directed, meaning there's some language behind it. It's definable, but it's useful to others. And that's, I think, the crux of what purpose is not. Purpose is not a self-serving mechanism,
Mm.
right? It's not something that, let me go find my purpose so I feel better. Purpose is, let me go discover purpose so I can deliver it to the world. And maybe as a result, I'll feel some of that long-term joy. But the danger is some people make purpose a destination or an achievement in itself. And if anytime you make something a means to some other end, it ceases to be the thing that it is, right? So be wary of making purpose the destination, because you'll just discover, you'll ask a now what question at the end of that.
Yeah, very good. One of the things you touched on just then was about delivering purpose or on living your purpose. So for everyone in the audience that goes through the exercise and they start refining their purpose and starting to understand why they are, not just who they are, but why they are, how do they go about delivering on that purpose and living it?
Yeah. I mean, the start and stop questions are great. If I were delivering this contribution every day, what would I need to stop doing now? And what do I need to start doing? So starting there, you can start to see some anti-purposeful behavior, right? We all have habits already. It's just like the me getting up and looking at my phone. I saw a problem. I said, I didn't feel that energy. What was going on with that existing habit? What might I need to stop doing? What might I need to start doing? It's a great question to ask yourself. Make 2 columns. The other thing is to create a vision that's tied to very specific behaviors. So one of the things I like doing is a visioning template called a feel, a be, and a do, where everything's connected. So if I were living this purpose every day, if I were living this contribution, using my strengths to contribute in a unique way, what would I and others feel? And write down some feeling words. For example, others would feel inspired. Let's just use that. And then in one column, write down like 5 of the most impactful feeling words that would indicate you're delivering your contribution. And then in the middle column, write down, okay, in order to have people feel inspired, who do I have to be? So what do I have to be like? What's my approach to the day? Now, being quality is my mindset, my approach. So for people to feel inspired, I would have to be affirmative. So I'd have to affirm people. So I have to be an affirmative person. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road, right? The third column is attach that being quality to a measurable behavior. So if Mick was following me around with a checklist and he's like, oh, Zach's being very affirmative today, what would Mick see me doing? So to feel it, if I were delivering my purpose, people would feel inspired. To feel inspired, I would have to be affirmative. And to be affirmative, I would have to show people, not just say thank you to people, but show them the difference that they make through a story anytime I praise somebody. So what happens is that oftentimes when we vision, we try to activate something, we think about what it will feel like. We sometimes think about who we would have to be, but we very rarely line it all up and make sure we have tangible, measurable behaviors that we can learn and implement and practice. So that would be another practice, a feel, be, do, visioning, and to get you to really articulate some measurable behaviors that you can say, did I do that today? Now, here's where this is powerful. One more point on this is that it's powerful diagnostic, right? Because if you're like, I'm not feeling inspired, you can then ask yourself, well, am I being affirmative? Did I appreciate someone today? Oh, no. Well, no wonder I'm not feeling inspired.
There's so much to unpack there, Zach. So if I'm going to borrow Maya Angelou for a moment, and just, I've used this on the show before and people are used to it, but people don't always remember what you say or what you do, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And that's what really drives what people will think of you in terms of the value. Now, I'm not talking about self-centeredness here or something, but if you really want to make an impact on people's lives, it's how you make them feel that's more important than anything else. So what Zach is saying is the outcome is the feeling. Think about how you want people to feel. The being is how you are, and the doing is the actions. I love this.
Oh, that's a great way of saying it. I like leading in with that Maya Angelou quote, because some people see that quote and they're like, well, that's great. You know, I get it. How do I do it? And I think it's linking up and starting with, how do I want people to feel based on me and my contribution, and who do I have to be and what do I have to do? You can also do this on a team or organization level too. I mean, it's a really powerful way to, if you're a leader, vision for your team, get people engaged. If we were delivering on our purpose, how would our stakeholders feel? Who would we need to be? What would we need to do?
Great segue, Zach. I want to talk about now common purpose. So far you've described purpose as being very individual, that it's like a set of fingerprints. And you said that the probability of two different people's exact kind of makeup matching up is like 1 in 7 million, I think you said.
Yeah, and the strengths literature, it's about that.
Strengths, okay, all right, very good. And I do believe that every single person on the planet has got their own superpower, and some people, it takes them a while to become aware of it or discover it, right? And a collective team is someone that can bring together all of those different collective superpowers. But if every single person on the team has got their own individual purpose, how do you find common purpose as a team?
Yeah, so there's individual purpose, which is why me. There's organizational purpose, which is why this. So why are we even coming together to do something? Well, what are we trying to accomplish? And as an organization, I will say this, you can apply the same passion, talent, impact Venn diagram to your organization. What's the energy source in the organization? What are you really good at? And what human problems do you exist to solve? Focusing on the human problem you exist to solve, that's the organizational purpose. It's why this work, why this organization exists. Now, common purpose is where the work comes in, because it's where everybody's individual purpose, everybody's individual strengths, and the unique difference they make come together to deliver the bigger organizational purpose. And that's our common purpose. And that is always shifting and changing, because it's dependent upon the unique makeup and contributions on your team. This is why, to have a sense of common purpose, people have to know how their strengths make an impact, and then how their unique impact ladders up to the organizational purpose, right? And when people can see that, you get that sense of common purpose, that we are all here, we have unique differences, and we all ensure that the organizational purpose happens.
So what I'm hearing here, if I can build it all up, so if we think about the individual and some of the things that you shared with us, that it goes beyond who you are into why you are. As a collective, as a team, you go from who we are to why we are. And then if you start, and you use the word laddering up, and I'm going to replay it and say, let's say scaling or amplification. So if you can find a group of people whose individual purpose is in alignment with each other, you can then have a scaling effect and amplification effect of that purpose. So then everyone on the team is going home each day with a feeling that they lived their purpose and made a positive impact on others. And collectively, the team has finished the day feeling that they'd lived their purpose and had a positive impact on others. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah. And the most important part resonates really strongly with me. And I think the most important part is that people can end the day knowing that they contributed. I mean, it goes back to the original definition of purpose as contribution, right? They know they contributed, but they know also exactly how they contributed. And so leaders who facilitate this really well don't just like tell people that they matter, but they have the skill set to show them exactly how they matter. And that comes with the leader's knowledge of people's unique strengths and unique impact, right? Because you can't show people how they matter without understanding someone's individual purpose. And that's where I think all of this comes together.
How do you think that all culminates just around the word culture?
So my book is titled The Invisible Leader, and it's not because I made that term up. That is a term by a woman who is a phenomenal management thinker in 1928, and her name is Mary Parker Follett, and she had a philosophy of leadership that the best leaders aren't people. The best leader is a common purpose, and she called it the invisible leader. She said leaders and followers are both following the invisible leader, the common purpose. Now, when purpose is the ultimate boss of everybody's decisions, right? As a collective, it creates harmonized energy, right? There's a clear storyline. So when it comes to culture, some of the biggest conflicts I see actually don't have to do with conflicts of what people are doing or how they're doing it. We like to masquerade it as that. It's really a conflict in a belief in why we're doing it, a shared belief in why we're doing it. And so when you have that through line, if you're interested in, if you like watching plays or reading good books, all good plays, all good books, all good movies have a through line. There's some sort of plot line that makes sure that when a character in a play is about to act, they know how to act because they know the through line. They know the bigger plot line. Purpose acts like that plot line. So that's why I think culture, behaviors, values, assumptions must cluster and highly correlate with that through line, with that purpose. And in the absence of that, you get a lot of wasted energy. You have a lot of reaction in organizations versus harmonized energy. So I think that's the function of purpose in culture. I think it's the foundation, it's the through line, it's the plot line, it's the reason why we talk about culture. And so I believe it's foundational.
I love the analogy of the through line or the plot line of either a book or a movie or like you said, a play. That's amazing. And
or music. I mean, you can a song, an album, all of these things that humans inherently are drawn to, the arts. We're drawn to it because it offers us some story.
Yeah, good.
And the same is true in organizations.
Yeah. That's really powerful stuff, Zach. And I want to play on this harmonized energy. This really caught my attention in your book as well. And maybe if with your permission, I wouldn't do it without that, but with your permission, I'd love to put a diagram of that in the show notes.
Oh, please do.
But I'll paint this picture for everyone. Zach has got this diagram of arrows going everywhere. And then with harmonized energy, the arrows are all in alignment and having a positive direction. One of the things that so many people complain about in their organizations, whether it be the leader of the organization down to the person on the tools, inefficiency. They talk about not value adding work. And parts of the bureaucracy of the organization, where some of it's value adding and others, people are sitting there scratching their head, why am I doing this? And it's,
Yeah.
and talking about that diagram you had with arrows going all over the place, that's the inefficient work. How do you think we could use common purpose and harmonized energy to address inefficiencies that, to be frank, apart from the fiscal impact of those inefficiencies, they drive people insane?
They do. And I would say that many of those inefficiencies are the result of initiatives, investment in projects that veer from purpose.
Right.
It's when an organization becomes distracted by their competition instead of captivated by their purpose, right? We get into that. Like, if you look at a case study, you can look at the Microsoft case study. Bill Gates had a vision to put a computer in every home. That was the mission statement. What happened in the mid 2000s? They achieved that. And then what? They started trying to compete with Apple. And then what? They started making really poor research and development decisions. And
Right.
then what? Teams were being rewarded for efficiency without having anything to be efficient toward. So when the current CEO, Satya Nadella, got on board, he went to his board and he asked, why shouldn't I let Microsoft fail in 5 years? And that was the impetus of the question, right? And he said it was the renewing of the soul, the spiritual infrastructure of the firm, of that they helped people achieve more. And so all ideas, initiatives, projects was tested against that meaningful purpose. They changed their KPIs from profit and revenue are now third and fourth. Employee engagement and customer engagement are now 1 and 2, right? I'm giving this example as an operational example of how when we go off purpose, when we don't know that bigger through line, we start making these decisions to, like as an organization, to compete with people, or we start making decisions just to create more product because we think it'll bring more money, and what we get is a lot of fragmentation, a lot of lack of belief in why we're doing it, and a lot of what feels purposeless, or which is the ultimate enemy of meaningful work, is futility, that what I'm doing doesn't matter. So I think a lot of it comes down to that, is making sure that our decisions, our actions, our products, whatever we're doing, align with and will deliver that future purpose. Otherwise, you'll get a lot of wasted energy around whatever it is that's not aligned.
That's a huge takeaway from this interview, Zach. I'm going to summarize it and say that inefficient work are initiatives that veered from purpose. That's a huge takeaway. I love that. I want to play on it a bit further and see where this takes us. Part of it can also be corporate memory, and corporate memory is very fallible. So the bad part of corporate memory is when people keep doing something because you've always done it that way. So the habitual nature, the corporate habitual memory of we always do this, but people have long forgotten the reason why that was done. And it may have started with a good intent, maybe a veered from purpose intent, but someone had good intentions of putting that practice in place, and it may not have hit the mark, but that reason is long forgotten. And I've got, immediately thinking of the admittedly ethically questionable 5 Monkeys study, things about, people just doing things because everyone else was doing it and have completely forgotten why they were doing it.
So when researchers look at motivation, energy to do something, the 2 most significant barriers to experiencing sustained energy, one is inertia. That is I'm doing this because someone told me I'm doing this. I've been doing it over and over and I've forgotten why I've been doing it. Some people call it the split. Many organizations, when they were founded, their what and their why are very tightly coupled, but then stuff happens. Markets decline, they have to compete, all this stuff, and they start focusing more on their what than they do their why, and they get this big split that happens in the organization. But inertia, right? Or Mick told me to do it, so that's why I'm doing it. It happens at the individual level as well. And the second is fear, right? Fear of, if I don't do this, I won't have financial security.
Right.
Right. If I don't do this, I won't get promoted.
Mm.
And those things actually erode the motivation that the people that are trying to get people motivated actually need. So one thing is to practice the practical applications, to look through that. Think about that corporate memory. Think about how it manifests in just everyday leadership and tasks with people, that inertia is present. People are just doing it because they've done it.
Yeah, doing it because we've always done it that way is never a good answer in my book at all. And I like this divergence from purpose concept. So I was about to say, if you are sitting in an organization that is inefficient, and I've just realized that's 90x% of the people listening to the
Yeah.
Every company's got some level of
Right.
inefficiency, is what I'm trying to say. So if you're sitting in an organization that's struggling with some inefficiency, never accept this is the way that we've always done it as an answer, and take Zach's advice and think about, has that practice or process diverged from purpose? That's a really good test for everyone to do.
Can I add one more element to
Please.
that,
Yeah.
if you don't mind? One of the reasons why inertia develops and corporate memory develops is because people don't feel like they can speak up
Yeah.
and question the corporate memory.
Mm.
And so that's why this concept of psychological safety, that I can speak up with new ideas, with feedback, without fear of retaliation,
Right.
is so critical as a mechanism for both meaningfulness, but then also for innovation and efficiency. Because when people don't speak up and they feel like they can't speak up, their ideas aren't heard, the most sinister force in organizations festers, which is learned helplessness, which is when people see there's no point in speaking up against this, so let's just do it as we've done it. And I think that cascades down from the top of the organization to the senior leadership, all the way through middle management. So let's not forget that corporate memory is acted upon by humans.
Yes.
And so creating that open space for feedback and a speak up culture is really essential for mitigating the effects of the "that's how we've always done it" culture.
Unfortunately, I've seen learned helplessness far too often in my career. And what Zach is talking about here is creating a psychologically safe environment where people can speak up, where leaders do remain mindful and they listen without judgment. So when someone raises their hand and asks a question, that you listen without judgment, and then that you follow that.
Yeah, and how this relates to purpose and purposeful cultures, right? Is, I mean, the four elements of culture that we know, I mean, through the research, creates a positive, purposeful culture are that that's meaningful. We've talked about this. People know that they matter and how they matter, that they experience more positive emotions than negative emotions. So positive, that they have high quality relationships that are trustworthy. But then the last one is that they can do all of that in the absence of fear. Because the problem is that fear and thriving can't coexist. So if people are in fear of retaliation or fear of risking their reputation or future promotion, it's really hard for an individual to thrive in a state of fear. It's really, and purpose, being purposeful, is a state of thriving. It's a component of thriving. And so again, if you want someone to be purposeful, find their purpose, to feel like they matter, it's very difficult to do that when you're in a state of fear. So that is why psychological safety is such an important cultural component to creating cultures where people can develop a sense of common purpose.
Okay, so we've spoken quite a bit about fear of judgment and fear of retaliation, etc. What about the role of social conformance in that? Where does that fit in?
Yeah, especially in organizations where you can norm what success is and what it looks like. I mean, we see this with the massive failure of diversity, equity, and inclusion in organizations, that this is what a successful leader looks like, sounds like, does, right? And so all of a sudden, like, we morph our way into it. It's the in-person phenomenon of comparing yourself on social media. So you start to dilute your uniqueness. And when an organization dilutes its uniqueness, it dilutes its resources for creativity, it dilutes its resources for innovation. And then people stand up at meetings and saying, why aren't we more innovative? And it's really because you've collectively diluted individuals' sense of their own uniqueness.
There's nothing more powerful and to make you go and innovate than someone telling you, why aren't you more innovative? Yeah, very good.
We need to, like, I get requests all the time, Nick, and I'm not making this up. I get requests from people, I want to create a more innovative culture. To which I always respond to is, well, when's the last time you got a great idea from somebody?
Mm.
And they're always like, well, what do you mean? Well, when's the last time someone gave you feedback? Well, what do you mean? And I go, well, that's innovation follows an environment where people can speak up without fear, where they can give their ideas, where they can be creative.
Yeah.
It's not something to pursue, just like happiness, it must ensue.
Yeah. The other thing you touched on, Zach, is something that's really important to us here at the Leadership Project as well. And that was about the modeling of behavior and what people observe. And one of the things that we often talk about is that people are generally lost about what it means to be a leader particularly when they first become a leader or when they go through leadership transitions in their career. There's not a lot out there. Maybe at the executive level, there is some good educational programs about leadership, but it doesn't necessarily filter down to those pivotal moments in their career when they transition from individual contributor to leader for the first time, or from team leader to functional leader, et cetera, that there's not a lot of good education out there about what it means to be a leader. So in a vacuum of that, the only thing they can do is they can look, if they want to get promoted, they look in the organization and go, okay, who are the successful people around here? And they start mimicking that behavior instead of being themselves.
I agree.
Mm.
I agree. And one of the problems with leadership in general is that we think of leadership as an idea versus what it means to be a leader.
Right.
So I've heard people say, I'm in leadership now.
Yeah.
Right. Versus I am a leader now, which is a very different way of thinking about leadership, as less of an idea and more as an everyday practice. And I think that, yeah, so what is a leader's craft? Like an athlete's craft is the fundamentals of what their sport, or artist's craft is their art. I think a leader's craft in any field is human beings. That's the craft, right? So all of this stuff that people name some of the fluffy stuff, like purpose, creating, mattering, all of these things that get at people's primal desires as humans, that is the precise craft of leadership as human beings. And what's difficult is, I think, and that's why I'm glad people like you exist, because what's difficult is that it's hard for people to turn that craft into learnable skills. And I think that's where leader development needs to move to in the future, is really making sure that these soft skills are conceptualized as hard skills.
100%. Leadership is all about how you relate to other human beings.
Right.
And all the great leaders in the world know that, and that's what they practice every day.
That's the craft, right? The craft is not your product launch.
Yeah.
It's not even your team's innovation. It's not your performance. That's not your craft. Getting more out of people is not your craft.
Yeah.
Your craft as a leader is to create environments where human beings are noticed, affirmed, and needed, and everything else follows.
You've summed that up beautifully, Zach. I love that. That's a really good segue to ask this next question, I think. So building all that together, many organizations struggle with attracting and retaining talented staff. How can we build everything we've been talking today about purpose towards a better ability to attract and retain the people that we want in our organizations?
This question is coming at, especially here in the States, a really important time. There's a massive labor shortage. There's more people than ever looking for jobs, and unemployment benefits have run out. But yet, despite wages being tinkered with, people aren't taking jobs. Why? People aren't willing to be indignified in the place where they spend 35% of their lives anymore. I mean, full stop. If you are not investing in creating a culture that creates human dignity, mattering, and meaningfulness, you will not retain labor. And the big this, and I'll say that's my, so 10 years from now, if I'm wrong, come back and get me, pin this up. But I think that it becomes more important now than ever when we're coming off the back of a period of collective self-reflection on why we're spending our time and how we're spending our time, that we create environments that are dignifying and not just pay well. And how do we do that in a recruitment process, right? Well, we show people exactly how we ensure that everybody matters here before we show them the $18 wage. We create job description, $18 an hour wage. We create job descriptions that show people the human problems the job exists to solve, the bigger problems the job exists to solve, whether you're a fast food worker or you're in the C-suite. And we show people the strengths we need people to do it. We invest in people's development. If you come here, you're not just going to be someone on the front line. We're going to invest in you as a human being and help you be a better human being when you go home at night. And here's how. We're thinking about the experience that you have when you go home and tell your kids about where you're at. We want to create an experience that you'll be proud to tell them that. If that's what we can do, that's how you recruit and retain talent.
Amazing, Zach. So giving people dignity, making sure that they understand that they matter, making sure that they understand that what they do matters, making sure that they understand that they are creating a meaningful impact, and then attracting people that have that common purpose, what we were talking before. So an alignment of those individual purposes towards that harmonized energy, and you will attract, not just attract them, you will retain them. People will work for you and love their job if they think, or no, not think, know that they're making a difference and that they matter.
And then I'll add one more thing. Make sure every single person in your organization that supervises any other human being knows that their primary job is to be responsible for the place where human beings living lives as vivid and complex and important as their own spend a third of their waking lives. That's it. If everybody in the organization knew that that was their chief responsibility, all of these other things we want, profit, innovation, which aren't bad, all of these things that we do to move forward as organizations, I think would follow.
Let that sink in, everyone at home. As a leader, you are responsible for 1/3 of someone's life. 1/3. That's the responsibility that you're taking on. Everything else comes second. That's really great, Zach. Thank you so much. That's going to bring us towards the end of the interview. I do have some rapid fire questions I'd like to
ask. Yeah, cool.
Sure the audience are going to be interested in. So you are a best-selling author yourself, and congratulations on that. A wonderful achievement. What about your favorite authors or favorite books?
Oh my gosh. I'll go back. I mentioned it numerous times. Anything Mary Parker Follett has written, but then Viktor Frankl's works, Man's Search for Meaning and Yes to Life. And from a more modern perspective, one of my books that I read a couple times is Legacy by James Kerr on the All Blacks New Zealand rugby team and the sustainable culture of excellence that they've created. So those are some of my favorites.
So touchy point, Zach. I'm Australian.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
But I love the All Blacks. I shouldn't say that, but I admire the All Blacks.
Yeah.
I love them.
I should have omitted that then.
No, not at all. I've got to share a story with you here. Between Australia and New Zealand, there is a annual competition called the Bledisloe Cup. Australia hasn't won it since 2003.
Okay.
2003. That tells you the All Blacks culture right there.
Yeah.
All right. And do you have a favorite quote?
I think it goes back to Nietzsche, that was invoked by Frankl when he said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how."
Wow. Really powerful. And I did notice that one quoted in your book as well. Very powerful when I read it, and even more powerful now when you said it.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you were 20?
That The one thing I have control over is how I make meaning of what's happening to me, not what's happening to me.
Yeah, really good. All right.
So yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
That's really good, Zach, and something for us all to think about at home. So Zach, I'm going to bring us to a close now. I want to thank you so much personally. I've learned so much from this experience of getting to know you and from this interview. I know our audience will at home. I'm committing that when this goes to air, we are going to have the Zach Mercurio challenge about purpose
Awesome.
on our Facebook community group. We're going to see how many people we can get involved to ask those questions every day. We'll pick a time period, 21 days or whatever, 7 days, and we'll go through that and we'll see what common threads come through and what we learn about ourselves and what we learn about each other.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much, Zach. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Mick.